Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to All Era Sports with Sirhan, coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America on this 13th of January, 2026. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Lots of craziness to get to today, especially in the AFC North with more coaching turmoil, more job releases, and a historical night for a historic rivalry. Plus, the ongoing saga between Virgil Ortiz and Boots Ennis takes yet another turn. I'll discuss all of that. And of course, Cincinnati Bearcats fans find a way to embarrass themselves even more. I'll touch on that on the end. And just when you think they can't embarrass themselves, they find a way to do it. I'll talk about it at the end. Let's go get right down to it. Lots to get to. Of course, let's start with what took place last night in Pittsburgh. Nothing more needs to be said. I mean, the Texans defense just punked the Pittsburgh Steelers. Never thought in the years I've been around the NFL, in the years I've known the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise, where I see them get just flat out punked the way they did last night against Houston. And we know that Houston defense is just lights out against everybody. And we know the Steelers offense is just a laughing stock. And when you got that two clash the way it did last night, that's the expected result. I mean, the fumble recovery for a touchdown by Sheldon Rankins, the pick six late in the game to ice it, which basically was just window dressing on a stat sheet. And we know what happened after that. Mike Tomlin basically just stepped away. I'll touch on that here in a second. But let's get to the Houston aspect here real quick. And I never seen a quarterback look mediocre in a 24-point blowout the way C.J. Stroud did last night. And moving forward, if Houston wants to have a shot against teams like Buffalo or New England, he's going to have to play much better than that. I mean, the guy just wanted to fumble all over the place, which I don't know why. He also wanted to not just fumble all over the place, take sacks, and not do what he's supposed to do as a quarterback. And he thinks he's in that elite category. As I said in a podcast a couple years ago, he stepped back rather dramatically, and the defense did all the heavy lifting. But as this team is going to go any further, C.J. Stroud needs to do more than what he gave last night. And he lucked out because, A, they played an offense who brought nothing to the table, and B, that defense is going to shut down everyone. And some people put them in the same category as the 2000 Ravens, which I won't go that far, but it's a lockdown defense. But if you're C.J. Stroud and you put yourself in that elite category, you better start playing like it because that defense is just doing everything right now. And there were two defensive touchdowns. And last year against not last year, the year before last against Cleveland, they had two defensive touchdowns to bail you out, and you weren't that great in that game either. So you better start playing better if you guys want to go further into the playoffs. Because if you don't, you're going to wind up losing in New England coming up Sunday. And we'll see what happens with that game as we talk about it down the line. But C.J. Stroud put himself in that elite quarterback class a couple of years ago after his impressive rookie campaign. And he was impressive in his rookie campaign. I agree with it. But now it's time for you to step up and put the money where the mouth is and play like an elite quarterback because that defense is special, what they have going on over there. We're talking about Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. on the edge. You're talking about, of course, Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley Jr. in the secondary, locking guys up. That defense is stellar. But C.J. Stroud needs to start holding his own moving forward if they're going to have a shot at beating New England coming up Sunday, because he can't play like he did last night, or they're going to be facing a trip back home to Houston for all the wrong reasons, because New England's not going to be playing around. This is not the Pittsburgh Steelers offense this defense is going to go up against. They're going to go against an offense with probably the MVP right now in Drake May, and C.J. Stroud has to be better than what he was last night. No questions about it. Case closed. But big win for Houston on the road, just pummeling the Pittsburgh Steelers, and just who's basically the default AFC North winner, given how bad the AFC North was this season, because you had to send a division winner up there to face the Texans, and it turned out to be Houston. And when the defense turned up to that second gear, the Steelers offense was just done and cooked. Actually, they were cooked all year long, but the Texans just piled onto it, and that's why we had the end result that we had last night. So kudos to the Houston Texans. And C.J. Stroud got the win, but he's got to play much better than that. I mean, I lost count how many times he fumbled the ball. Even if a couple times he got lucky and fell on it, but it seemed like the ball was just squirting out of his hands every chance possible. That has to change coming up Sunday against New England, because New England's not going to play around. They're going to be watching that, and they're going to be trying to get to C.J. Stroud. And again, that offensive line needs to do a better job protecting C.J. Stroud moving forward so he can make those plays. And it's been a problem for Houston over the last year and a half. And it still reared its ugly head. Even though they made it an offseason investment, they still can't protect them. For what reason? Nobody knows. Now to the Pittsburgh side. And we know what happened today. It was Mike Tomlin stepping down after everybody in Pittsburgh was calling for his head over the last decade, it seemed like. And maybe you could probably say he fired himself before the Steelers brass could probably fire him. It's the old adage, you can't fire me because I fire myself. And that's what Tomlin pretty much did. But like in Baltimore with John Harbaugh, maybe the same can be said with Pittsburgh, that despite all the success Tomlin had, and he had a lot of success, that it was time to turn the page and for a fresh face over there. And probably the best thing that happened for both Tomlin and the Steelers is that they parted ways. See what we said last week with Baltimore and John Harbaugh, same thing. I mean, Tomlin's going to get a job if he wants it anytime he wants. I mean, if he wants to have his phone ringing and have people calling him for a job, he'll land the interviews. He'll get one in a minute if he wants it. They're saying he's going to take a year off, which I wouldn't blame him. But if he wants another job, he can get it. And there are a lot of people out there, a lot of teams with coaching vacancies who would do everything they can to get Tomlin as their head coach. I could probably say at least a third of the teams would rather have him over their current coach. And I'm not going to name particulars, but he'll land on his feet somewhere real quick if he wants it, because he has a pedigree, he has a background, he has a resume, and he'll land it. He'll land real quick. They say he's going to take off this year. I know the Steelers hold his rights, so it's going to require a trade of some sort, which I'm sure that'll take care of itself. And the Steelers brass, who took care of Mike Tomlin for 19 plus years or however long he was there, I'm sure we'll work something out with him should that time come around. But it was time for the organization and Mike Tomlin to just go their separate ways. Tomlin probably needs a new change of scenery. Steelers obviously need a new, fresh face. It's probably the best thing for them moving forward. And we talk about the wildness that's taken place over the weekend when it comes to the AFC North coaching staff. I said this earlier in the year that every team needs a total facelift. And right now, 3 of those teams are going to go through it. That's Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. And it's going to be for the best. And moving forward, you're going to see the results. Because you hold on to something for so long, and it starts to stale, and it starts to flatten out, and you're not getting anywhere with it. It's time for a change. I mean, Cleveland held on to Kevin Stefanski as long as they possibly could. But in fairness to Stefanski, the Browns fans set him up to fail because they wanted Deshaun Watson over Baker Mayfield, and we know how that turned up. John Harbaugh with Baltimore, we know how that saga went. And last night with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. I said whoever coach relieves their coaching, their coaches might have the best future. Little did we know I was going to have 3 teams who was going to relieve their coaches. Actually, 2 of them relieved them. The third one just relieved himself. And now the AFC North is going to have 3 teams with a bright future moving forward. It's going to take a little time. Maybe Baltimore's more of a win-now situation when we talk about Lamar Jackson. Cleveland might be a playoff contender with that defense, which is just lights out. And Pittsburgh's going to have some makeover, but I think they'll be back in the fray of things within a short time also, because they have a ton of draft picks coming up in this upcoming draft, and I expect them to draft and draft well. But the AFC North, think about this for a second. In 2023, all 4 teams, Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati, finished 9-8 or better. This season, they sent 1 team to the playoffs. That's Pittsburgh with a 10-7 record. And it was basically a default winner because nobody really stood out. Baltimore couldn't live to their expectations. Cincinnati went back to being Cincinnati, and Cleveland's always Cleveland. But the facelifts that's about to take place with 3 of those franchises in that division is probably what the doctor ordered for all 3. We talk about Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. And moving forward, it's going to pay dividends. Maybe not in the super short term as people think, but maybe within the next year or two, when they start to figure things out, then you're going to see the difference. And you're going to see down the line, a fresh face was needed for the 3 respective franchises. And you're going to have probably at least 2 of those teams every year competing for a playoff spot. And it's still going to be Baltimore and Pittsburgh because they always have that foundation, and the foundation's always going to stay put for as long as they're relevant and they stay to exist, because they always have the foundation, find the right pieces to make their franchises work, and that's why they had the success they had over the years. And I expect that to continue moving forward. Cleveland's going to take some work because you still have the Haslams as their owners, and Andrew Berry's their general manager, and we know how they screw it up. But if they get the right head coach, maybe they can get something in the right direction, because that defense is lights out, and that defense deserved some kind of a respectable offense this season and never got it. And that's going to be the question moving forward. What are they going to do? But the 3 of the 4 teams got the facelift they needed in the AFC North because it was needed for a while due to the fact that their product and what they were trying to do ran stale and ran out. And it was time for fresh faces and fresh scenery all the way around. And in a short time, expect all 3 teams, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland, to find themselves back in the fray of things in the AFC supremacy. And I think those 3 will be just fine in the long term. Maybe a bit of a short-term hit, maybe, given with personnel. I don't know what's going to happen with the free agency and the draft and who they bring in. But it was needed, and we'll see where it goes moving forward. I still have the old clip about the AFC North, how the entire division needed a change. 3 teams did it, and now they have the brightest futures. Now, who has the brightest future of the 3? It's up for you guys to decide. I ain't going to decide it for you because I don't know yet. But Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland made the smart moves. Actually, for Pittsburgh's case, Mike Tomlin made the smart move for him in Pittsburgh. And moving forward, it's going to be, I think, more a positive than it is a negative. You'll see it in due time. Which leads me to the one team that did not make the change. And everybody knows who that is. It's right here. And maybe everybody's saying in Cincinnati that maybe they should be smacking themselves upside the head for it. But here's the problem. It's a Bengals status quo. They're too cheap to find a legit head coach for this talented roster who's missed the playoffs 3 straight seasons. Not once, not twice, but 3 straight. And you're still relying on Zac Taylor to still be this second coming of, with him and Joe Burrow, second coming of a Reed and Mahomes or Belichick and Brady, because that's what the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media propped it up as when they went to that, gift wrap Super Bowl run in 2021. It's simple. I mean, the AFC Championship was Zac Taylor's job security in Cincinnati. That's never going to change. The Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media are the biggest group of Zac Taylor puppets, and we know they're the Zac Taylor and Mike Brown puppets, and we know the ownership feeds off of that financially because they go to the games, and because the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media are puppets for Zac Taylor and Mike Brown, and if it benefits Bengals ownership financially, that's why it's never going to change. And the gullibility of this particular fan base in this city, from all the media to all the radio networks to all the stuff they do like I do, among many others, the gullibility when they get suckered in to this sort of thing year in and year out is why nothing's going to happen. As my all-time favorite cliches in all walks of life, nothing changes if nothing changes. You're coming off a 7-10 year and your 3rd straight year missing the playoffs. And I know you put up with Marvin Lewis for I don't know how many years with that 0-7 playoff record. And everybody acts like going 5-2 in 2021 and 2022 still means something. The NFL is of what you have done for me lately, league. And what happened in 2021 and 22 in Cincinnati is essentially a mirage right now because it came, it saw, and it's gone. And we were left wondering what happened. And that's why what happened last week with that ChatGPT presser from Mike Brown to the social media platform saying they're going to keep Duke Tobin and Zac Taylor, and the presser by Duke Tobin Friday, which basically just reiterated everything everybody knows, that he wasn't going anywhere, validated the fact that nothing's going to happen here because nothing's going to change until the I see it. As the old adage says, I see better than what I hear. That's how I'm going to live through this, and I'm going to watch it. Because everybody in Cincinnati missed the boat badly, and I mean badly, after they lost to Kansas City in the AFC title game 4 years ago. Because that was a time you should have made the necessary changes, and because you didn't, and you sent the wrong people out, you sent the right people out the door, and you brought in the wrong people, and you had the gullibility and the puppetry of the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media falling for it. That's why we had 3 years of failures since all of that took place. And as I said before, we talk about those contract signings they had with the top three guys, Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, 120 plus mil a year. You miss the playoffs 4 straight years. It's going to be an ultimate albatross, and things are going to get really, really nasty because I don't know what are those three guys are going to put up with. Because we went through this before. The Bengals and the Bengals fans went through this before, and it seemed like they want to go through it again because the lack of accountability to the higher responsible people in this particular positions. And because of it, that's why we had another season of failures. They resort to excuses and they resort to cowardice. As the great Bill Parcells once said at this Hall of Fame speech, losers get together in small groups. They make excuses and point fingers. That's not the exact phrase, but I'm paraphrasing it. That's the Bengals fans in the Cincinnati media when it comes to the failures. And we look at what's taking place since the playoffs started with Baltimore, Cleveland firing their coaches, and Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin saying, I'm done. And you're Cincinnati, you're standing pat thinking that's going to be the answer. And when those three teams surpass you again in the AFC North, don't say you was warned in advance because you're getting warned right now. Those three are going to pass you up. And when they pass you up, there's no turning back. The puppetry in Cincinnati, I say puppetry because that's what it is in Cincinnati. You're getting strung out. I mean, you remember the old video, the video with Instincts Bye 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 where they were playing them like puppets? Right now, Mike Brown and Zac Taylor have turned Bengals fans and Cincinnati media into Mike Brown and Zac Taylor puppets, continuing to support him and continuing to attend all the activities they had so they can fund and profit ownership. And they come back and they complain about it, but they still go at it anyways. That is where another problem lies. And we look at what took place in the AFC North over the last week and a half. And basically, two of the teams saying, we got to move on. And then after last night, Mike Tomlin saying, I got to move on. That should tell you where the problem lies. And we're going to go through 2026. And unless a lightning bolt strikes in Cincinnati to where something, as everyone blowing up like they did in 2021, expect the same thing. Because one thing about the other three teams and what made them successful, more so Baltimore and Pittsburgh, I can't say Cleveland, more so Baltimore and Pittsburgh, is they know what's needed. They take a proactive approach, and they don't wait till it's too late. And the problem in Cincinnati, more so the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, because they're Zac Taylor and Mike Brown puppets, They see everything, and when they see it, it's too little, too late. That's where everything falls apart. We talk about what's going on in the AFC North. And right now, the Bengals brass is getting grilled watching the three teams in the AFC North start to make changes and better their futures because they've seen it. And the Bengals fans in the Cincinnati media haven't seen it. And because they haven't seen it, they expect a fourth year of another failure, and it's going to create chaos. That's the problem. And the AFC North, as I said, 2023, all four teams 9-8, all four had good futures. Look like they're trending in the right direction. Look at what's happened since from then to now. And remember last night when Pittsburgh went, I don't say they didn't earn it because they won 10 games. I give them their due. But it was a default division winner having to face Houston. And somebody was going to have a default division winner coming out of that division and having to confront that Houston defense. And it turned out to be Pittsburgh. There was a time when whoever came out of the AFC North earned it the hard way. And the fact I had to come out here, and some people say I had to send a default winner, tells you how far the North has fallen. But now, when you think of what Baltimore and Cleveland did and what Mike Tomlin did for Pittsburgh, they've opened the windows again. And I expect at least Baltimore and Pittsburgh to be in play for the division title here real quick. Cleveland is going to probably knock on the door for a playoff spot. I still have some questions about how that front office runs. And if you're Cincinnati, you paid three guys in the sense of $120 million a year, and those three teams pass you up for the AFC North supremacy. It's an embarrassment, and it's something I don't want to have to deal with. And it's going to be all on the shoulders of the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, who are essentially Mike Brown and Zac Taylor puppets. And because of that puppetry, that's why we had the failures the way we had. And it will continue until these two eyes see it. Again, nothing changes if nothing changes. Somebody needs to tell the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media this and stop being a bunch of puppets. Case closed. And on the same subject of the Cincinnati Bengals, on a different topic, it was 35 years ago today. We'll put it this way. Greatness was taken away from us. Unfortunate, and the brutality of the NFL showed. As it was at the old Coliseum in L.A., the L.A. Raiders beating the Cincinnati Bengals 20-10. But, of course, that wasn't the story. The story was the end of Bo Jackson. You know the play where he was tackled by Kevin Walker? As he was falling down, as he was pulling his leg, the hip came out of its socket. And not only that, as Jackson was trying to move forward, that hip separated. And not only did it separate, he tried to put it back in the socket, but as he's putting it back in the socket, apparently a vessel broke, and that's why he needed hip replacement surgery. And essentially ended his NFL career. But it was that play. It was 35 years ago today that happened. But we always talk of premier athletes. You probably call him almost a pop culture icon because that's what he became when he came out of Auburn. And that's what Bo Jackson was. You think about, of course, his career both in college football and baseball. I'll stick to the football angle for the moment. He won the Heisman Trophy in '85. He was a star running back in Auburn, and was a star outfielder in baseball, obviously. Played running back. You talk about a guy who ran a 4.12 and a 40-yard dash with power, a 1989 Pro Bowler, and looked like the future was bright. And when you think about everything he had at that point, I mean, not only was he the two-star athlete, he had the Bo Nose campaign with him featuring Bo Jackson and other sports like tennis, hockey, and even horse riding, making Bo Nose a catchphrase, which was a hip commercial for Nike for the longest time in the back end of the 80s. And of course, basically, in the NFL's version of the human highlight reel, you remember that same distinction they gave to the NBA's Dominique Wilkins? They gave it to Bo Jackson. Speed, power, and excitement all over the place. That had some jaw-dropping plays. Of course, the top one on my list is that game in Seattle where he ran so far out of the stadium, ran to the touchdown, he ran out of the stadium. I mean, he went underneath the tunnel and just kept running. That was Bo Jackson. God, of course, got his shoes. It had all kinds of potential. He was a symbol of an athlete who had the high potential and showed it, but because the injuries cut it back, never fulfilled it. But we talk about what Bo Jackson became. Bo Jackson became the household name everybody was. And we talk about the ability, he wasn't just anybody ordinary just playing two sports. He was dominant. And this is before we had a guy like Deion Sanders. And you know how Deion Sanders was for the Atlanta Falcons, San Francisco 49ers in the NFL, and of course, the Braves in the Major League Baseball. But Bo Jackson, before Deion Sanders, was it. And we talk about his endorsements, the campaign. Bo Jackson captivated the hearts of not just the sports world, but the entertainment world, because his Bo Knows campaign was an it thing across the world landscape. And his ads, linking him to a famous individual named Bo Diddley, and that athleticism, when you mix it all up, you had something surreal and looked like he was about to take over the NFL, especially at least the running back position. And this is before we had guys, some of the elite runners, like a guy like a Barry Sanders come around, and he was around a time when Eric Dickerson, among others, was around. And Bo Jackson, we talk about just pure talent. He's on the top, and he had it all. And when he was running all over the Cincinnati Bengals on that day, in that particular playoff game, till the unfortunate tackle happened, it showed you just what he was and what he's about to be. And of course, later on, it spun off to the gaming sensation Tecmo Bowl, spun off of him, and it was him that got the Tecmo Bowl legend going, and that's what made Bo Jackson a pop culture icon. And it was just unfortunate 35 years ago today that took place, because he was headed toward greatness, and at the running back position, maybe could have had the distinction of the greatest running back ever, because we talk about just pure talent. He had it. In his brief career in the NFL, and this is only 4 years, the guy rushed for almost 2,800 yards on just 515 carries, had 16 touchdowns, but also had 40 receptions for 352 yards. And we talk about that, that's over 3,100 yards on a grand total of 555 touches. That's over almost 7 yards a play when the ball was in Bo Jackson's hands. That tells you the problem Bo Jackson possessed. And we talk about the injury. He still continued on with baseball as a member of the Kansas City Royals, but his NFL career was done. We talk about popping a vessel and needing hip replacement surgery. That's it. Yes, he tried his luck in baseball afterward and still had a solid career afterward, but the Bo Jackson we knew was gone. And Bo Jackson will always be remembered, unfortunately, as a player who could have been had it not been for that. And the whole thing was just a freak accident. I mean, there's nothing dirty or malicious about it. I mean, he was tackled on the leg. He was trying to break it, but when the hip separated and he tried to put it back and pop a vessel, that was it. And it's unfortunate, because we talk about surreal talent to ever come around in the NFL. And we can point to a lot of names and a lot of criteria. Bo Jackson checked a lot of boxes, and he certainly was on his way to elite all-time greatness. Because I talked about it the other night with Eric Dickerson, same with Bo Jackson. I mean, when he got to that second level, good luck trying to slow him down. And it wasn't just he was fast. He was fast and had brought strength with him. We look at how his physique at the running back position, something that was unheard of for a player of his ilk at that time. And we talk about the muscles he had. This guy was so built and chiseled. I mean, one of the great physiques the NFL had ever saw. That was Bo Jackson. He was about to become a trendsetter and almost like, in a way, a pioneer for the running back position at that time. Because remember what we had before him for the longest time, we had guys like it, but the only one maybe close was Eric Dickerson and maybe a Walter Payton. But Bo Jackson put it all together, and in that 4-year run, just exploded to the hearts of all NFL fans and all the sports fans because he became a pop culture icon. That's what made Bo Jackson the hit sensation for that 4-year period. And of course, we know the Bo nose trademark all over the place in the commercials for Nike. And of course, the iconic game at that time, Tecmo Bowl for Bo Jackson, which was everything was spun off to. That's the legacy of Bo Jackson. Unfortunately, the guy, known for a player who never lived up to that potential because of injury. But when he showed the potential, he was a blur of the moment that came crashing onto your television set, and you were glued to see what he wanted to do, not just on the field, but off of it with all the endorsements, the commercials, and of course the video game part of Tecmo Bowl. That's Bo Jackson, and he was one of a kind. And it was unfortunate 35 years ago today that ended, because it ended a potentially elite all-time great, at least at the running back position, because that was Bo Jackson. I mean, think about these numbers for a minute as I talked about. I mean, 2,782 yards rushing, 352 yards receiving. That's 3,000 yards on about 552 touches. And he had the two longest touchdown runs in Raiders history, 92 and 89, 91 and 87. Of course, a memorable one was that one at the Kingdom in Seattle where he just took off, went to the second level, turned on the afterburners, ran through so fast he ran into the tunnel and forgot he was playing football. That was Bo Jackson, and that was why he had the potential to be something special. If you lived to see it, you saw an immense talent at the running back position. And I can talk about running backs who were talented, but none did it quite like Bo Jackson for that short period. It was unfortunate the NFL world was deprived of greatness because injury cut it short. Because after that, he wasn't seen in the NFL. He was basically had to retire by default. Tried to continue with the Kansas City Royals, but it was the end game for him. Bo Jackson, Bo knows Bo. Nobody knew Bo better than Bo Jackson. That's why the commercial was Bo knows. He was one of a kind for its time, and the footage is out there. If you want to see just what greatness was at running back position like, we can talk about all of the others also. He was going to be as great as all of them. Footage is out there. I encourage everyone to watch it. He was a beauty and fun because he brought it all at the running back position. Hope he's doing well right now. Yeah, he was a phenom. I can use phenom for a lot of athletes, but it certainly fit Bo Jackson to perfection. Now, from the history of the NFL, now we go to the history of boxing. This took place 78 years ago tonight at the arena in Cleveland, Ohio. And this was the closure of one of the epic light heavyweight trilogies, maybe in light heavyweight history at the least. It was Ezzard Charles versus Archie Moore, widely regarded as at least the top two, or maybe two of the top three light heavyweights in the history of that division. And they had a trilogy. The first fight, Ezzard Charles controlled the pace, won the decision. A little more than a couple years later, over here in Cincinnati, Charles and Moore had a rematch. Ezzard Charles won that one, although there were some questions about whether he legitimately won it. I thought he won it fair and square. Not saying it because I'm a Cincinnati homer, and I always stick bias for Ezzard Charles. I saw the footage. I thought he did just enough to win, although Moore kept coming on. We know what Archie Moore was all about. So we fast forward to this third meeting. This took place in Cleveland. And this was a case, the only chance that Archie Moore had to get off the schneid against Ezzard Charles, who won the first two fights. And the first one he controlled, the other one could have gone either way. I thought Charles did enough to win. But we talk about this third fight, probably the most epic of the three fights, because both guys saw the best of one another. Started out early as Ezzard Charles using his pugilistic boxing skills to keep Moore at bay, winning the first couple rounds. Doing what he usually does, slick, stay away, slip and stay in the pocket, make you miss, make you pay. That's Ezzard Charles, the pugilist of the sweet science at that time. and he controlled the early rounds. Looked like he's going to run away again. Except this time, Archie Moore showed why he's in that upper echelon of all-time great light heavyweights with that power. Started to pressure Ezzard Charles in the rounds 3, 4, and 5. And it looked like he seized control of the fight as he started to find his rhythm and started to find Ezzard Charles through what Charles likes to do. And it looked like Moore had the fight under control. But in round 6 and 7, back and forth action, when you think about it, both guys having their moments, but it was more so Ezzard Charles in control. It's a case of him actually out-punching Archie Moore, even though Archie Moore had his moments. And after round 7, it's about as deadlocked as you could be, because you got the best of Ezzard Charles, and you also had the best of Archie Moore in what turned out to be one of the all-time great light heavyweight fights. But we go to the 8th round. We talk about what took place in this round, and it looked like with more Charles starting to seize control, it looked like he was going to control the fight. But what happened in round 8, a left hook out of nowhere by Archie Moore, the patent left hook that's knocked fighters out, suddenly hurts Ezzard Charles, and he starts to pour it on, and it looks like he's going to get a knockout. But out of nowhere, Ezzard Charles comes with a crashing left-right combination out of nowhere that put Moore down, and then Moore beat the count the first time, and then as Moore is trying to survive, the in-ring the ability to adapt in the ring was what made Ezzard Charles great. And knowing he had Archie Moore hurt, he was able to adapt this time. It was able to put another left-right combination to put him down and out for the second knockdown of the 8th round. And the second time, Moore was counted out, and Ezzard Charles sweeps the 3-fight series with Archie Moore 3-0 to win on the 8th round knockout in a fight he had to earn to get the win, because Archie Moore brought it. A lot of interesting tidbits. We talk about these two and their place in light heavyweight history. And I said this, we talk about the peaks of certain athletes, and it's more so eye-popping in boxing, because in boxing it's one-on-one. It's not like the NFL or the NBA or other ones where you can peak, but you can find a way to peak later or hit the downturn later because you can find ways around it. In boxing, it's a different kind of a peak, and it's more peak when you can space it out as long as possible, but do it against high-level competition. And when you're forced to have to dig deep, like Ezzard Charles had to do after Archie Moore hurt him in that 8th round of that 3rd fight, you find out a lot about yourself. And we did that with Ezzard Charles on this night. Because we talk about the greats of all-time great light heavyweight history, a lot of people anoint these as a top 2. I'm not going to argue with it, but there's a couple guys in that conversation. I'd probably sandwich Billy Conn in the middle of those two, just for the simple reason that Billy Conn's at his peak. I had a higher peak than those two. But the reason why Charles gets the nod over Conn was because Charles had the longer prime, and it was not far behind the best of Billy Conn. And there's a lot of ways you can compare the two, but Billy Conn had probably a higher peak of the 3 fighters we talk about, those 3. But Ezzard Charles was not far behind it, had a longer peak. And remind you, this guy never got a chance to fight for the light heavyweight championship because of bad business involving Gus Lasinovich. And because of that bad business with Gus Lasinovich, Ezzard Charles forced to move up to heavyweight. And that's why he had the heavyweight career he had. I'll touch on his heavyweight run in a second. Now we talk about the peak of Archie Moore. Archie Moore's an interesting one. I've said greatness due to longevity. He was probably a case of a fighter who peaked as he got older, because he started to use his craft a lot better and picked up a lot from some of the guys he'd been in the ring with, not just the 3 fights with Charles, fighters like Joey Maxim, among many others. And as he got older, he found a way to use his physical strengths to his advantage and got better. And because of it, that's why his back end was probably greater than his front end. And that's how he managed to hit the pay dirt when he beat Joey Maxim. Because Archie Moore, I said this with him, George Foreman, and Bernard Hopkins, and the Foreman's case more of his second career than it was the first one. When you're driven to be successful and have a goal in boxing, and you have that chip on your shoulder, like those three did, and you keep digging, and you still want to keep digging till you find the ultimate gold deep in the well, you're going to find a way to get that gold in the well and be successful. That's Archie Moore's career as a light heavyweight, because he kept digging and digging, waiting for the opportunity. Had a lot of ups and downs along the way till he hit pay dirt when he beat Joey Maxim. And what puts him in the same category as Charles and Khan was his long reign as a light heavyweight champ at the back end of his career. As I said, the only two fighters I can say they had that much success in that back end of their career, remotely close to Archie Moore, were George Foreman and Bernard Hopkins. As I said, that's the list. And that's what made Archie Moore an all-time great at light heavyweight. Granted, he lost his 3-fight series to Ezzard Charles, but Charles was just a different specimen. But Archie Moore, because his length and his peak came at a later time than what you would usually think in the sport of boxing, especially in those days, because this was unheard of. That's why he had the career he had, and that's why he peaked the way he peaked, and that's why you talk about this guy as a top 4 or 5 all-time light heavyweight, because of the back end of his career was. And when he finally hit pay dirt to beat Joey Maxim and then rule the roost in the light heavyweight division, his status at light heavyweight history went up. Who can say that in their careers at beyond the age of 40 as fighters? I mean, George Foreman and Bernard Hopkins. That's the list. A couple others maybe in there, but at that level, Archie Moore, George Foreman, and Bernard Hopkins. That's the only correct answer. Now to the winner of that trilogy, Ezzard Charles. As I said, he went up to heavyweight. And an interesting tidbit that was thrown at me earlier today is about his place in heavyweight history. It's not talked about enough as a heavyweight. He got the distinction of the greatest light heavyweight of all time, and I think that's widely regarded, even though he never fought for the title, as I said, because of bad business with Gus Lasinovich. But he did win the heavyweight title, made 8 successful title defenses, and no one's going to say he challenged Muhammad Ali or Joe Louis for the greatest, but he had a nice, respectable run as a heavyweight. And as a distinction with the greatest light heavyweight, you could also say probably a top 17 all-time great heavyweight because of his run. Better than you think. We consider 2 wins over Jersey Joe Walcott, beating guys like Lee Uma, Pat Valentino, and of course Joe Louis, albeit under weird circumstances. That was made Ezzard Charles great as a heavyweight because he did hit the pedestal and had a nice run. It was part of a run from 47 to 54 with guys like Joe Louis, the 2 fights with Jersey Joe Walcott, and 2 with Marky Marciano. But maybe what elevated his place in history as a heavyweight was the 2 fights he gave to Rocky Marciano, considered the two of the tougher fights in Marciano's career, and being the only fighter to last a 15-round distance with Rocky Marciano during his heavyweight title reign. Probably say that enhances his legacy as a heavyweight. So we talk about his legacy as a light heavyweight. He has as great of a legacy as a heavyweight. Probably top 17 up there in that category. It's right there as all of them as a heavyweight. Who can make that kind of a distinction? I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to find it. He has every bit that said a lot about Ezzard Charles, doesn't it? And the number 1 icon in Cincinnati, as I said countless times, Ezzard Charles, Oscar Robertson, Aaron Pryor, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Barry Larkin, Ken Anderson, Anthony Munoz, and Luciano Lucho Acosta. That's your list of Cincinnati icons. And and Ezzard Charles is on the top of that list. His legacy here in Cincinnati, because of his runs as a light heavyweight, and more so as a heavyweight, because that's what got everybody here in Cincinnati hooked back in his time, is his run as a heavyweight champion. That's why he has a stature of number 1 in Cincinnati sports history individually, an icon. And it was 78 years ago tonight at the arena in Cleveland, Ohio, when Ezzard Charles and Archie Moore, who might have the distinction of the 2 greatest light heavyweights to ever step in a boxing ring, completed that trilogy in a really great risk back and forth pace in that third fight, where for a minute looked like Charles was in control, then Moore was in control, then momentum's back and forth, and then after being buzzed, it was Ezzard Charles who floored Archie Moore twice to win on an 8th round knockout to conclude that trilogy 3-0 and probably have the rightful distinction as the greatest light heavyweight in boxing history. I mean, I did not know this. I just put this out there. People want to know just what Ezzard Charles was. Bill Miller, the one-time trainer of James Toney, had James Toney watching footage of Ezzard Charles and some of the old school moves that he did. And we think of what James Toney was as a middleweight and super middleweight under Bill Miller. He used some of what Ezzard Charles did. And that's why James Toney had the success he had, because he used some of those old school tactics learned by watching the videos of a real old school pure pugilist like Ezzard Charles. That should tell you what Ezzard Charles' legacy is, it was, and always will be in the fight game. And I encourage anyone to look it up, especially some of his finest hours, because he has more of them than you think, especially at heavyweight after he beat Jersey Joe Walcott to win the title. And Archie Moore, as I said, a greater fighter as he got older because he learned the craft and found a way to succeed at that level, succeed at the age of 48, and no one can make the claim he had. The only two closest were George Foreman and Bernard Hopkins, and that's a list. And I conclude on two other things, both of them a bit sad, but maybe I shouldn't be surprised that they're both sad. Well, let's start with what's taking place in Cincinnati. Apparently, I don't know if it's tonight or tomorrow night. Apparently, some Cincinnati moron in Reddit has called for an all-bag, over-your-face game for the Cincinnati Bearcats at home. He wants the entire audience to put bags on their head because of the failures of the Cincinnati Bearcats and Wes Miller. Well, first of all, the fact that you're doing this behind a mobile device on Reddit shows the whole world why you're a coward. And anyone that partakes in this shouldn't even be a fan. Was I don't know what you're going to get showing up to a stadium with a bag on your head, looking like a thief, being caught for some form of an identity theft charge, and you don't want to show your face. That's what's going to supposedly happen. I don't know if it's tonight or tomorrow night. I don't remember what night. But you want to talk about embarrassing? I don't know whose idea that was. But what an act of cowardice for you to have everyone do that. Now, I get it. I mean, everyone wants Wes Miller out of UC. I get it. I understand it. I'm not saying you're wrong for it. But there's other ways you could go about it. And having everyone show up at a coliseum to watch a basketball game with bags on their head, looking like criminals about to perform identity theft on innocent victims, isn't the way to go. But then again, we're talking about Cincinnati sports fans, and we know that's how they like to dress. So I won't get too much into that. But I'm not sure that's the way to go. Even UC legend Nick Van Exel said, don't do it. If Nick Van Exel says don't do it, you don't do it. It's plain and simple. That takes care of that. I'll wait till the whole thing plays out till I talk about it more. But I think it's just moronic that you think that this ideology of showing up to a stadium with a bag on your head, looking like a criminal, ready to perform identity theft on an innocent victim is going to get you places when it's not. That's just a terrible thing to do. And the second one I conclude with this is the fiasco between Virgil Ortiz and Boots Ennis and the camps. Here we are in 2026, and if you can't find a way to negotiate any kind of verbal agreement in these days in the fight game, especially for a fight like that, what does it say about you guys at the end of the day? And I said this fight needed to happen in 2026, or there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered. You know, Oscar De La Hoya, the coke smoking promoter, says, I'm moving on. But Virgil Ortiz's manager and Boots Ennis promoter, Eddie Hearn, both said, if you want to do, let's do the fight. I mean, question I have is, why is everyone so buzzed over this fight when there's nothing at stake other than somebody losing their O because one doesn't have a belt, the other one has a belt in another weight class, and he hasn't had a quality win, even though he has a belt. Why is the fascination of trying to marinate a fight that people think you can marinate it the same way as you did some of the all-time great fights and think you're going to get a big hit out of it when you're not? Look, Virgil Ortiz and Boots Ennis are pretty damn good fighters. I'll give you that. They're pretty darn good fighters. I mean, they're both undefeated for a reason. I mean, Ortiz had a couple fights with life and death with guys like Sergey Bohutchuk and Israel Madrimov. And of course, Boots Ennis won a fake welterweight championship while he was ducking Terrence Crawford. But he's undefeated, and he wants this fight just as much as Virgil Ortiz wants to fight. But here lies the problem. If the fighters want to fight, why is everyone still putting this thing in the middle and still dragging this thing out? What's the holdup? I mean, if the fighters want to fight, why don't you just go ahead and make it? Fight a date, everyone get into a room, get a freaking mediator, settle it out, set a set date. And I don't know why we're talking about this fight as if it's going to be the biggest thing boxing has ever seen, because it's not going to be that. No one's going to put Boots Ennis in the same conversations as some of the all-time great sort of fight the junior middleweight class, like a Winky Wright or someone like that. And no one's going to mistake Virgil Ortiz for being a left-handed Julio Cesar Chavez when he's not. Why are we going obsessive over a fight and having this kind of hoopla and having a hard time making a fight that is not going to be what it's supposed to be? Because everybody acting like the winner of this fight's going to if this fight is made, the winner's going to move up in history of the division. That's not going to happen, because either way, both guys have lots of work to do. But why is everyone hyping up for this? And why is it, if the fighters want this fight, that all of a sudden everybody around them doesn't want the fight? What's the holdup? I mean, the fighters want the fight, make it happen. Everybody wants to fight, make it happen. It's right there for you guys to make it happen. What's the reasoning for this to not to happen? I told you guys, if this doesn't happen by the end of 2026, it's a failure, and we're going to have some questions that's going to have to be asked. And that's the problem. It's like it's not going to happen in 2026. And guess what? We're going to have questions that's going to have to be asked, because, it's probably one of the bigger fights you can make. Bigger. But let's not act like the winner of this fight is going to be the greatest thing the junior middleweight division has ever saw if it happens, because it's not going to happen that way. Nobody, I don't know who's ducking who. You'll probably say more so Boots Ennis is ducking Virgil Ortiz, because remember, he ducked Terrence Crawford already. So you can't just say Virgil Ortiz is ducking him. But what's the reason for the fight not to be made by now? There's got to be a reason for it, shouldn't it? What is it? I've been waiting for the answers. It's like the equivalent of taking a test, but it's a test that involves questions you haven't seen or studied for, but you can't come up with the answers. That's what this is all about. Get into a room, get a mediator, get somebody, a middle person, I don't care who, hash it out, make the fight happen, and just be done with it. Because don't know what the pub is with everyone thinking this is going to be something in boxing history, because it's not. But if these two guys want the fight, what's a holdup? They want the fight. What's the holdup? If people are trying to get into the way of a fighter making a fight, they need to get out of the fight game. I don't care who it is. I mean, I've said this countless times over the years of all the fights I've covered way back. I can trace back to a whole laundry list. But if you're going to make a fight, and I get there's a business angle of it, but even if the business angle of it doesn't make any sense if the fighters want it. I don't care what I don't care about the stipulations. I don't care about belts. I don't care about splits. I mean, that's always going to be an issue. If these two guys, Boots Ennis and Virgil Ortiz, want to fight as they say they do and are serious about it, that everybody around them needs to follow suit and make it happen. That's what it comes down to. I'm not going to put it in the history of books like a lot of people are, because those guys aren't that great. But if the fight needs to be made and they want it to be made, let's do it. And just put this thing to bed. In fact, here we are. We're talking about Virgil Ortiz versus Boots Ennis and acting like it's going to be the second coming of like a Leonard Duran 2 event, which you know what happened at that event in Montreal, New Orleans, excuse me. It's not that kind of an event. It's just a prize fight. I mean, let's not act like whoever wins this fight is just going to be the greatest thing boxing ever saw, because it's not. Because Bucina's already done a share of ducking, and I can't blame Virgil Ortiz because we saw Bucina's duck before already. That's the problem. And it looks bad on that side because they keep saying, if excuse in the book, listen to Eddie Hearn today. Eddie Hearn is always a babbling idiot. If you're going to make that fight, just get into a room, get a mediator, make it happen, and let's be done with it. That's all you have to do. And there's no belt. Obviously, there's no belt. There's no winner's going to take home the equivalent of $1 billion that you win of a Powerball lottery. Make the fight, and let's see it, and let's be done with it. Because there's other business in the sport that need to be taken care of. And the fact everybody affiliated with these two parties want to be in the way says a lot about them at the end of the day. Make the fight happen by any means necessary if the fighters want it. That's all that has to be said. Easier said than done? Yes, it is. I swear, every time, every year when I've been in the fight game, and I did this, it's different than when I cover NFL. And when I was in the fight game, and we had this, it's basically, when fighters want it, they find ways to get it done. And I can point to a boatload of examples. And not just the fighters, but rival promoters who've had bad blood, and they know the fighters want the fight, and it can be made. They basically just dispense with the personal vendettas and say, let's make the fight, and we have it. Again, point to a boatload of examples over the years and over the decades. But the fact that we're talking about this fight and people not wanting to put their vendettas aside for a fight that doesn't have as much pizzazz like some of the other ones I've seen in the past, it says volumes, speaks to arrogance and greed. And the problem is that arrogance and greed cost the fight game a boatload of big fights over the years. The ones that weren't made that should have. And might put this one in that category. But what is it going to take? Because the fighters want it. If the fighters want it, what's a holdup? That's what it comes down to. And that's all I ask. And I said this better happen by the end of 2026, or we're going to have a whole lot of questions going to have to be answered, and a lot of serious questions. And I'm not exempting Bucina's from anything because he already done duck Terrence Crawford already. And Eddie Hearn tries to circumvent it, and we know how Eddie Hearn acts. So once a duck, always a duck. But I want to be careful with this because Virgil Ortiz and his representatives aren't necessarily saints. They're known for their share of ducking of their fighters. So let's get this fight happening so everybody can just shut up. Everybody wanted the 2 cents? They got it. Make the fight if they want it. What's the holdup? Case closed. I swear that's why I stopped dealing with this sort of thing, because there's always something in the way of it. And it's been that way ever since I've been around it. I mean, I can point to the bad blood over the years between Don King and Dan Duva, Don King and Bob Arum, even Bob Arum and Golden Boy in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. But when it came down to making the fights that needed to be made and the fighters wanted it, all those promoters said, heck with it, we'll make the fight even though we hate your guts. And it seems like we're not getting that. And that's why the fight game has gone to where it's become today. Therein lies the problem. And on that note, that'll wrap up this edition of All Era Sports with Sirhan on this 13th of January, 2026. If you missed this show or any other shows of the past, you can catch them on the Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio apps, the audio versions. And if you like the video version, we can see my boxing gloves in the background of this brown wall. You can watch the video version on Spotify, clips throughout the week on the X platform. My Patreon is going to be launching with a couple of posts here soon. Also, for those of you who follow me on the X platform, there's now the X articles feature. I will be posting on that periodically. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in every walk of life. Always take care of yourself first. Always respect other people's boundaries, But most importantly, when it comes to boundaries, don't let anyone step on your boundaries. Do all that, all the good things will happen. Once you have someone walk on you and step over your boundaries, nothing else is going to matter. Always respect their boundaries and don't let anyone step on yours. That's the importance of self-care. And on that note, that'll wrap up the show. I will be back tomorrow night. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. And I will see you tomorrow.